You are ready, Madam Mayor.
Mics are hot. We'll go ahead and call this fourth 2022 draft budget work session to order. Today we have community development, library, electric department, motor pool, CIP. And I was thinking, I see the library director here, I was thinking that we could start with library community development, if that's okay with everyone, since I think those are more straightforward. And then we can go to the electric department, motor pool, and CIP. And we can change that order, but we'll just start with that for the time being. Okay?
Start with library?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes.
So library is found on page, what is this, 50?
50.
And we'll turn it over to administration if you have anything else that you want to outline for us.
The only thing that I have, and I do apologize, and we'll go through all the paper on your table, but the two items I did email to you regarding personnel comparison and then non-personnel comparison. It's just your information that you've asked for. And you'll see in the electric, I do have all the COVID breakdown of funds. So you'll see it tonight for the first time in electric, and then your second draft budget will be throughout. So just, and at this very moment in time, and I do say moment in time, the general fund is now 11,000 in the black, and that's attributed to the jail position that was eliminated.
Oh, okay.
Not eliminated, but unfunded.
Okay.
So that's this moment in time. All right, and then the library director is here to speak to her budget.
All right, I'm just going to go through just the major ones. And then if y'all have any questions, just feel free. Down to 7,009 under contracted services. We looked at moving $72,000 up to personnel for a maintenance and cleaning person. Right now we are paying that, or we were paying that to the janitor system we had coming. This is a position that would not be created. It's one we already have that we pay PERS on. We're just looking at filling it again. And that would just to make sure that they like it needs to be being maintained properly. The next line is 7216 maintenance and repair. We've gone from 28.5 up to 40,000. We have quite a few repairs that need to be done on that building, including the flex lines where we have Long come out and service them. Those flex lines, we have a couple leaks down in the basement. They're waiting for them to come down and fix right now. And those are just going to be more repairs we're going to have to do next year as well, just to keep up with it. And then the next one was 7217, small tools and equipment. We are looking at replacing computers. Right now, if you come into the library, we have no computers for our children. And that's a big, that's an issue. And that's a resource, and we don't have it for them. We're also, our adult computers and our young adult computers, we're looking at replacing them. They're at 5 years right now. They're starting to get slow, and we're looking at replacing a server as well. And we're hoping to get those all so we can better serve the public. Do you have any questions?
I have a question about personnel, and it might be a finance question. So is the janitor position fully funded under the library, and then they'll just peel off and help with Parks and Rec in the summertime? How does that work?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions? I know we're just going through this right now. But that is, I'm assuming, the major of the increase in the salaries.
Yeah.
And then it looks like staying on track with the budget for library books and periodicals, and it seems like everything's just continuing. Great.
Mayor Terry,
Go ahead.
how many adult computers are there?
Currently, we have We have 3 for adult and then 2 in the YA. One of them in the YA room currently doesn't work. So we have 4 and 3 that adults can use right now.
Okay.
We do have some in the research room as well. There's 2 in there. Those are pretty outdated too. And then we have none for the children.
Are the computers full for the adults a lot of the time?
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
that is utilized all day long.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
And there are some sort of internet restrictions when kids are on the computers and stuff.
Yes.
It's up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Just one more question. I see the heating oil went up significantly. Is that because of like a maintenance issue, or is that just?
It's just the price of, everything going up.
Okay,
Just trying to prepare.
sure. Thank you.
And since this covers the museum also,
Yes.
it seems like the hours post-COVID have been pretty robust in the museum and the library.
Yes.
And the museum's free to the public during the winter time, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, we had to change the museum hours quite a bit just from going through the period of being short-staffed, and then rehiring and then training everybody.
Any questions? No, good, great, thank you. And then community development, I think, is on page 22.
Hello.
Courtney, go ahead.
So just a couple of the main changes here. You'll notice on contracted services that has increased, and that's due to a GIS assessment contract that we've entered into, and that's split between multiple departments, but we're going to be updating all of our GIS information and updating that program, which will help not only community development but other departments to be more efficient with the data that we have. Then as well, the operating and supplies has gone up due to printers, purchasing new printer and larger printers, and then just the ink for those printers are very costly. And then going down also, if you'll probably notice under education and training, that's gone up at least from what the 2020 and 2021 actual was due to the lack of travel because of COVID. But we foresee some needs for traveling in this following year, not only because we'll need to train for a new floodplain manager, but also just the planning associations, trainings up in Anchorage and whatnot. So those are some of the main ticket items.
Yeah, so line item 7010, engineering, you'll notice, so we increased our allotment for our, well, we're trying not to call it on-call engineering, but R&M engineering services, so we're going to try and use them in a greater capacity just as we work on the expansion of affordable housing in our community. You guys saw another email today, and community development's going to be highly engaged in that. And then just to follow up on what Courtney was talking about with 7302 and 7303, Courtney's been on board for about 6 months. We've got a new community development director coming on board on November 8th, and we want to invest heavily in their training just as we're bringing new staff on board, and we want to produce quality, and community development's going to be a linchpin for us in a lot of the projects that we have coming up in the coming years. So that's where that $13,000 between the travel and then the education and training comes in.
We did ask the borough if they would take on floodplain. They said, so the floodplain entities, they will not. So we have to do that as a city.
Which a lot of that training can be done is at Williamsburg if they start those meetings up again. And then also in this, just to bring it to council's intention, under contracted services, that's that you budgeted $100,000 for the
Yes, ma'am.
feasibility study.
Oh, that's what that is. Okay.
For the recreation center feasibility study. It's in this department. Which I guess my only comment with that would be, I wonder if we would be better served to actually get something on the ground, like a new pavilion or something that might be actually useful. I know community development was working on, or found a project that had to do with some exercise equipment outside, and maybe putting that up at the Wellington Pavilion area. I know that the feasibility study's on our list of priorities right now, but we didn't have anything that said it had to be an outside study necessarily. So just noting that that's in the budget as of now.
We will be
Go ahead.
discussing that when we do the CIPs, right?
So we'll talk about it during the CIP portion.
No, that is actually budgeted in the operational portion of it and not in the CIP. It was put in because of the adopted resolution to move forward with that, but
So it's just there.
once in the budget, you can make amendments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that would come back to us for approval, if it goes out to RFP.
Right, right. And it's not out for RFP, and we haven't done anything other than put it in the budget, so.
Okay, this is where.
Are there any other questions with this community development? And Monday night also with the software for the bed and breakfast system, is that included in the budget if it gets passed? Is it under contracted services, or how will that get put into the budget?
Contracted services. Contracted services.
So that's in there also, whether, and then, so depending on what the action is on Monday night?
Yes.
Okay. And so I guess, would this be the budget that, as we're looking at expanding utilities or, some of those subdivision engineering and plans, would it be out of this budget, or is it a combo between this budget and the enterprise funds, or how does that work?
Are you talking about the campground utilities, or are you talking about,
Anything, any of our utility, like Hemlock subdivision, or,
that'd be an appropriation?
She's asking about the engineering costs. So the
Oh,
engineering
I'm sorry,
is
yes.
split between those departments. So it's split between ComDev and then it'd be Public Works as well.
but there is some money in this budget
Mhm.
for us to keep working on?
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you meant the actual.
Oh, no, sorry, I was,
No, that's fine, budget.
I couldn't put that in.
You couldn't get that $2 million in the operating budget?
come on.
I tried hard.
Any other questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And then maybe before Director starts, this, electric has been recalculated. Also with electric, there was a combination of personnel within the updated budget, and the last page has the comparison of the personnel between the complex.
Last page.
And the combination was between general operations and meter service.
Okay, I see. Okay. So we're working off the later.
Yes, thank you.
Ready?
Yes,
Thank you. Yeah, no problem. I thought I would start just by giving a brief overview of the overall revenues and expenditures. If you look at our projected budget for 2022, we're looking at total revenues of 14.2 million, expenditures minus the depreciation motor pool of 12.9 million. That will give us a difference of approximately 1.3. I think the council's aware from previous meetings that in 2022 we will start a significant portion of our infrastructure work. So beginning next year, we anticipate a revenue bond payment of about 1.1 million. So when it's all said and done, that will leave us with a margin of about 200,000 for the year. I do want to say that as I looked at the budget for electric, there were a large number of funds coming into it for the first time. So I hope as we move forward that we'll be able to consolidate some of these funds and make it less complicated, not just for us, but for council as well. So we will definitely be using this year as a baseline year. Okay. If you look at the general operations, one quick note in the revenues. If you look in the revenues itself, you'll see that we have included the new industrial rate in our revenues. And the customers that fall into the industrial are the Alaska Sea Life Center, JAG, and Icicle Seafoods, or OBI.
So is that 5370 industrial service? Is that where it is, or where would it be?
If you go to the revenue page, yes, correct, starting at 5370.
And then down, anything that says industrial?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And if you,
And so, sorry, since it's in here, so will that start January 1, or do we need to, does it need to come back to us again?
no, it's already been approved.
Right.
Okay. And then if we go over to the general operations budget itself, if you're looking at the larger items, you will see that at 7006 in legal, we have 45,000 budgeted there. That is because we do anticipate we've got the union IBEW contract that comes up at the end of June. So we do expect some additional legal fees there. If you look at the next line item, contracted services, you can see that we have bumped that up fairly significantly. But really where that money's coming from is we are consolidating the contracted services money from the administrative budget, which is coming up after we look at general ops. And we added it to the general ops because most of our charges were coming out of general ops anyway. So we just consolidated those two budgets for contracted services. And then the engineering fee, you can see we've got 70,000 in engineering. Some of that's because we do anticipate a couple of DOT projects that we're working on as we move forward. And as you heard Stephen mention, we will be sharing in the cost for R&M as well.
So talk about some of the items falling under contracted services.
Most of the work with contracted services ends up having to do with our power plant and working with EPS and EPC or whoever we bring in when we're doing work on generators or we need assistance troubleshooting in some way. You may recall that in our wholesale power supply contract with Chugach, that one of the places we're hoping to reduce cost will be in the contracted services and the engineering services as we move forward. This year I was hesitant to just take money out until we see how that relationship works and see exactly how much lower we can take those costs in the future by utilizing Chugach as a resource.
Thank you.
Any other questions there? Okay, if we turn over to the administrative expenditures, As I mentioned, you will see contracted services is at zero because we moved that to the general ops fund. So that was 81,000 that we moved over. And we also bumped up the subscription and dues in this particular account. That is a result of us joining the Alaska Power Association. And through that relationship, we have been able to take advantage of safety audits of all of our facilities. They put on regular training seminars and conferences as well. And then certainly the networking opportunities with the other Alaska utilities. Flipping over to the standby generation.
Well, let's stand here. You know, this is the page that shows that there's still motor pool rent in these enterprise funds.
Motor pool is in all enterprise fund, that's stated, just not the general fund.
Which we see that in there. Okay.
We ready to move forward? Any other
Yeah.
questions?
It's a lot to digest, but
I know,
keep going.
yeah, not a problem. When we
Standby
look at
generation. yeah.
standby generation, really the big number here, as you can see, is the fuel for the generators.
Yeah.
That's budgeted, it was budgeted at 120. We're only going to bump that up a little bit to 130. Right now, we're on track for this year to come in around 110, 115. So that's the fuel that we're primarily using for our testing each month that we do of running the plant. So we make sure we run it once a month. First of all, to keep the equipment up, but secondly, we also do some training when we're running the plant as well.
Which that line item doesn't look like that's where you had captured the cost in the past?
There was money for fuel for generators in another account,
Okay.
but this is where it should be.
This is where.
And this goes back to wanting to consolidate some of these funds as we move forward.
Okay. And, you know, I guess, just a side note, you know, I can't remember if I was on council or in the public, but, you know, there were a few years there to save money, they didn't start those generators once a month. And I
Right.
think that that's, to me anyways, that's something that's very important because
It is.
I think there's an expectation in Seward that when the power goes down, those generators start. So-
Absolutely, and we really cannot afford to not test them on a regular basis and make sure the equipment's functioning properly. The good news here is that we've seen the cost for fuel go down. And the reason for that is with the improvements we've made, putting in the new control systems, they're actually running more efficiently. And so we have seen a reduction in some of the fuel cost.
Okay.
Okay?
We do love our generators. And I'm sure it's not just making sure that the equipment works, but going through that process with,
Correct.
with the staff.
Keeping our staff practiced. Also taking the opportunity to do training with other members of our team so that if they have to step in an emergency situation, they could do so.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. Any other questions on standby?
How's the fence coming up there?
The poles are all in. Within another week or so, they should be pulling fence. Okay. So now we're in substation operations, and contracted services is probably one of the bigger items there. And really, we based that on the historic look as well as bringing in support as needed if we need any kind of troubleshooting or assistance with substations.
And utilities encompasses what on that line? That's 7015.
The utilities there would involve, let's see, with substation operations. That would be for, you know what, I'd have to look back. I don't know, Jason may know.
Is there a double, do you think there's a double in accounting for the fuel?
It might be the fuel from the line below in utilities instead, but we can look into that. Because then that would be
Yeah.
fuel, electric, water, and sewer in the buildings.
Push back on you, Josh.
No, I don't think so.
Because that seems more like in line with fueling those generators. So I wonder if it's in there.
When I was working on the budget, that's one of the line items I looked at, and I did ask other people in the department. No one could really tell me what it was for,
Okay.
but I was afraid to eliminate it because I
Yeah.
don't know.
Can
So
we
as,
pull that accounting?
Yeah.
Because you should be able to pull,
That's a lot of money.
yeah, that's. So it'd just be, that's a question that I have. We definitely want to keep funds in there that are necessary, but. Yeah, 7015 utilities.
that's probably.
Because the fuel, because the 7103 fuel for generators doesn't look like that's where it's been captured before.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
so I mean,
we're
it's-
actually charging it through here? Okay.
Anyway, so you guys will figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize for not knowing that.
That's why we're doing this.
Let's see, any other questions there? In transmission operations and maintenance, you will see the big ticket item here is in the contracted services. Again, that's money that we will be spending for tree trimming, clearing, right-of-way maintenance. This year, we got a significant portion of the work done near Moose Pass. We will finish that work up next year. It's not going to take but maybe a week or two to finish. But most of this money will be used over on Nash Road, because before we go in to start doing the infrastructure work and rebuild the system there, we will need to go in and do right-of-way clearing. Okay.
Mayor Chair.
Go ahead.
So I know we're doing a lot of catch up with the right-of-way clearing. Is there like an average amount per year that once we get caught up, you would say would be?
Yeah, where we would like to get is if you're doing routine maintenance, you're talking about 15, maybe 20,000 per mile. Once we get it caught up, we want to get on a 5 to 7 year cycle. So however many miles that equates to, we've got approximately 50 miles of transmission today. So with the transmission line, if you're doing, 5 to 10 miles a year to meet your 5-year average, then we would be looking at spending about 15 to 20,000 per mile for 5 to 8 miles approximately.
Thank you.
Next is distribution operations. You can see most of the numbers there are fairly small at this point, and just see if you have any questions.
Is that just a portion of your salary under this line item, or is it the assistant's salary, or is your salary just apportioned out through all these different divisions?
Sam, how's my salary?
Your salary is all in administration.
Okay.
So this would be when linemen charge their time when they're
Got
doing
it.
Yeah.
specific.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no questions?
Next page is the wholesale power cost. This is what we pay Chugach for the power we buy from them. And as you can see, we're not expecting an increase on the base rate portion of the bill we're receiving from them in 2022, but we are expecting costs to go up associated with the cost of power adjustment, the fuel.
And that's by contract, so those costs are,
Correct.
go ahead.
This is, I don't know if anyone would have to answer this, but on electric 3004, there was two gas power purchases in 2019. Is there a reason why it would be put in transmission?
Are you talking in transmission?
Yeah.
What is the
And
top
you said
of it?
2019?
It says electric transmission operations and maintenance expenditures. And line 7101 is Chugach power purchases.
I would have to defer to finance.
So that actually, the 220 and the 301 right below it, that's one single month's bill. That was just a missed hand key expense in the wrong department. Hitting 3004 instead of 2006.
Okay, thank you.
And that puts us on the last page, which are the work orders. Again, fairly small numbers here. And I'll just take any questions.
So you're budgeting for work orders and service requests at 2021 levels-ish with just a small CPI increase?
Correct.
Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
Is there any way that we could see the power fuel costs from like 2008 or 2009?
From, you talking about
I guess it would
the
really
wholesale?
matter because, never mind, sorry, because we had usability on them. It's okay.
Okay.
So last page, so where we're at?
So that was,
And this gets everything, personnel comparison on one page. Is that what we're doing? General operations and meter service.
Because it was split out, the salaries were split out, and I just did it a total, a comparison and added them together so you can see what they were and what they are now.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Any other questions? I know we kind of did a deep dive with your rate changes, so it was helpful to have that as kind of a baseline looking at this budget.
and I will say, when you look at what our revenue bond expense will be as we move forward, and I had talked about during the rate case that we would have to look at rates once we started dealing with the infrastructure issues. And so I will stand by that statement based on the margin that you see that we have. We will need to, I would think, look at rates as we move forward. I've actually got a conference call tomorrow with the firm out of Anchorage that we'll be using for our future rate studies to take a look at the revenue bond expenses and take an overall look at our budget so that we can begin planning to see where we fall as we move forward. As we look at that, certainly we would not be anticipating doing anything in rates in 2022. It could be that it would be 3 years out. Another possibility is that we could look at doing what's called rate riders. And with a rate rider, what you do is once you complete, let's say we were doing Nash Road in 2022, once you complete that part of the project, and you can actually show that it's done and the work is finished and you have an actual cost, then you could do it in stages where you go ahead and put that amount in the rate base. We don't know that that's what we will do. Again, those conversations will begin tomorrow so that we can begin thinking about what our action may be in the future.
And I would like to point out that depending on when the bond bank goes out to market to issue the bonds, we may not make any payments in 2022, but we did want to include that here on the cover sheet so that we know what it would look like if we were to. Typically, when you issue a bond, you only pay interest in your first year, but they're looking at possibly January, February to issue the bonds. They're waiting for a couple other cities to get council approval and voter approval on their projects so that they can include it in the pool. And so we may not make any bond payments in 2022. So when we do the 23-24 budget, we kind of get a better idea of 21 and 22's revenues. The picture might look a lot better as well.
So that anticipated bond payment, if that isn't expended, you know, if we aren't paying bonds in 2022, will that just go into the reserves for the electric department, or how will that? Okay. That's good information. Are there any questions, or maybe while council's digesting it, I don't know if there's any, you guys are all public, but is there any public that would like to speak to? Go ahead.
I just had a quick question. On the distribution, operating, and maintenance, is that a category like you have meter service in Sam? Just like general ops and meter service?
Yes, but in this one, we combine meter service with general ops. Because meter service we really use for the meter contract.
Right.
But we left that one separate.
But what I'm asking is the distribution, operating, and maintenance, is that a category that we charge our time to, just like general ops and meter service?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah.
Any questions from the dais?
Since the meter reading essentially is done in finance, is that position in this budget, or does that stay in finance and is that funded by the transfer?
It was not a position, it was a under contracted services, a contract. So in the last budget cycle, we actually removed it completely. Because it was 60,000 in the meter service department of electric, we just removed it.
So that the staff that's doing it now is a portion of their salary paid under the electric department?
It's not, but that general fund administrative fee
Fee.
covers that cost that finance does during the meter fee.
The transfer?
Yeah.
Right.
So that's included?
Yes. But it's not a position itself.
Does that answer your
I
question?
think so. And that's in general ops?
The transfer shows on the general fund revenue side.
Oh, it's just part of the transfer and
Mhm.
transfer out.
Right.
Okay. It's not an actual contracted service.
Correct.
Correct.
And it does actually show transfer out in here, but that's not just for, that's for all. Right.
So essentially, sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Essentially, we do that transfer out normally for finance, and we don't really know what the formula is, right?
Right, that is
It's just-
something we plan to work on for next year, to actually have an actual formula and a reason for it. It appears that the CPI has just been applied over the years without a formula, a rate-based formula. So that's something else we want to work on for next year, and including on water and sewer too, because the same thing happens there.
Great. So you took that.
There was a formula at one point in time, and we just kind of rolled it forward. It just needs to be updated.
Okay. So we took the amount from last year, added the CPI, and then we added the 60,000 on top of that.
We
No.
didn't, we got,
Okay.
removed the 60,000 altogether. That contract is no longer, so we
Gotcha.
just took it
Okay.
out.
Sorry, thank you. Anything else? Thank you. Oh, you have one more question?
Any other comments from the public? No, one more.
No, that's good, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you, Rob.
Yep.
Next is motor pool.
Right, I'm going to have Sam explain it, and anyway, I'm sure you'll have questions. I had many questions for Sam, so.
So motor pool, I looked this morning, there was about 3.6 million in cash in that fund. Yes, we have appropriated for the police cars as well as the, what was the 300 and something thousand we just got approval on, the sweeper? Have we paid for that? Do you know?
I put it in, it's been passed,
Okay.
been paid.
So that may or may not have the 300,000 taken out of it for the sweeper that we just purchased. So that's a fairly real-time cash balance. So on the revenue side, it's basically just your interest income for the money sitting there, as well as the motor vehicle rent that the departments pay.
And
So
just from enterprise funds.
just from enterprise funds, yeah, so the 387,000, that's just enterprise funds. That would have been about 300,000 more if the general fund was included. And then I did ask the department heads that are replacing vehicles and equipment if they've had any salvage value. So that $29,000 right below was the sale of the 2 current fire command trucks, the 4 patrol vehicles, and the public works loader. And that was just their best guess on what they think they could get for those pieces of equipment to go back into the motor pool fund. On the expense side, all you have is the depreciation on all the vehicles and equipment. And then the 1.194 capital equipment expense would be all the proposed requested vehicles and equipment by department heads for 2022. And down below, the purchases include, and then there's just a breakdown of what vehicles and what equipment are being replaced or purchased. If you have specific questions about those purchases, I think most of the department heads are here, yeah. And if not, I can answer any others.
Madam Mayor, for me, I wanted, Ron? Oh, there it is. Actually to speak to his vehicles this year, because actually there's been a change in the vehicles.
Come up in the trucks? Yeah. We have 2 trucks in our fleet. One we're in desperate need of replacing and one we're in need of replacing. So I had talked to Sam a couple of days ago. We could put off one of the trucks, definitely. The other truck I would like to include in the budget if possible, but if we have to nurse it for one more year, we could.
But right now it's included.
Right now it's included,
Both.
both. And like I said, one is in desperate need.
And then I would like to point out on the trailers, 35,000 and 38,000 within the electric fund. These are 2 pieces of equipment that are currently not in the motor pool fund, which means that when they're making motor pool payments, it's not a vehicle that's currently in there to be replaced. So they actually have to either, they have to transfer their cash into the motor pool fund and buy it out of the motor pool fund so that their motor pool rent will increase and they'll be forward funding the next trailer, if that makes sense. So we have a pool of vehicles and it's specific vehicles. When you're replacing them, you've basically already paid for them. And so you're replacing them if it's a new vehicle or a new piece of equipment, you need to transfer the cash and then start paying for it for the next piece of equipment to replace that.
So reverse engineering that, in your budget that we just reviewed, it includes those trailers and those,
Right.
that cost. Okay.
And Sam, one trailer would be a replacement.
Oh, okay.
The
I thought
tilt,
they were both.
no, the tilt trailer would be a replacement.
Great to know.
And one of the trailers is in the budget, in this operational budget.
Do you have a question?
Well, yeah, this may be another dumb question of mine, but you said there's 3.6 million in the motor pool fund?
Yes.
So this 1.194 million, is that subtracted from the 3.6 at the end?
No, that's currently,
after?
that's currently now. So if we were
Okay.
to appropriate and spend the 1.1, it would be down to 2,
Oh,
just over 2, I believe.
so that
Yeah.
would be subtracted from the 3.6.
Correct.
But we'd still have a hefty balance of over,
Yep.
So at the end of next year, we have, when we're doing this in a year, you'd say to us, if this all happened, there's $2 million in motor pool.
Yeah.
And there are 3 loans now out of motor pool, and so those motor payments all will go back in. Am I wrong?
There's only one motor pool loan left, and that's the hospital PERS loan. And then if the animal shelter one that you guys already approved, which by the end of the year, then we will be, I think it was 900 and something thousand to cover the remaining costs of the animal shelter. That was contingent upon
Is that your fault?
land sales.
Oh. Sorry, we have a malfunction up here. Go ahead.
So did I just hear you right, that we have 3.6 right now? After this, we'll have 2.5, and then we're gonna give the loan to the animal shelter, that will bring it down to 900?
No, the animal shelter loan was 930,000 contingent upon land sale by the end of the year. So if we do need to do that loan, then we will be taking from the motor pool to pay for the rest of the animal shelter, which you guys approved this year.
Which is how much?
930,000 would be the remaining.
So can I clarify my question?
Mhm.
Thank you. So we have 3.6 million right now.
Mhm.
After this, it's minus 1.2 million, right? And then
930,000 after that.
900, so let's just say another million. Okay.
So that brings us down to,
1.4.
with the enterprise fund still making payments into it.
Correct.
But that is part of this proposed.
Yes, that would be in your motor pool vehicle rent revenue.
So that is a payment that we retain.
Yes. So the hospital pays just under $100,000 a year for their loan, and that balance is $423,000 at the end of this year. So they're getting close to paying it off. It was well over $1 million for the initial loan.
Can I ask you a question? How come this page doesn't have, where does it have that 3.6 million? Like where do we see the total, the actual total? Am I just missing
Well,
it on this page?
the 3.6 is the cash balance, which
Yeah.
is, on your balance sheet. This is just a revenue expense for your budget. So in the actual budget book, we do include the cash balances as well.
Okay. Go ahead.
Where would we find the payments that are, okay, there's a payment that's coming from a loan to the healthcare? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, so the loan that the hospital borrowed from the motor pool years and years ago, that would be done through a transfer back to the motor pool fund annually to pay off the rest of that loan.
Is there, I mean, I guess we understand there's difference between liability and assets and revenue and expense.
Right.
But is there any way to see a picture, or could you refer me to where I would look if I wanted to see loan payments as revenue? To see like an overall picture of this fund?
No, loan payments aren't revenue. That would not, that's against accounting practices. So it would be, you would have to look at your balance sheet, which is in the CAFR. That's the only spot that you would see assets.
Do you
and
have a
liabilities.
CAFR there in front of you?
I have one right here. Do you know what page it would be on?
Yeah. We'll have to find it first.
Okay.
24. So, fourth column over, healthcare
That's
facilities,
this last one.
about halfway down,
It's current.
under non-current liabilities.
Yeah.
Interfund loans, 423,851,
Yeah.
which will be your balance at the end of 2021, which ties to the 2021 budget work.
That's the hospital PERS.
Correct.
And then where do you see how it gets paid off?
You wouldn't see that on here, it would be rolled up in your transfer schedule, which would be on the next page. Almost all the way down, transfers in and out, it would be rolled up in there.
Okay. That 100,000 healthcare facilities.
Yeah, so that would be a net of other things as well.
Go ahead.
So, on that same note, where do you see, so all the departments that are paying their payments into the motor pool, those two are coming in the transfer in, transfer out number?
No, those are in each department's expenditures.
Right.
It's a revenue into the budget.
Yeah, so it's an expense in the general, in the departments, and a revenue in the motor pool fund, so it's not a transfer.
But it's not
It's done
showing
through a
here as a
journal
revenue.
entry.
It's on,
It is a revenue for motor pool rent.
5950 on the sheet, 5950, that's the revenue in. And this year it's on the budget, just the enterprise revenue is coming in.
So motor pool rent and interfund loans separately handled and accounted for differently. One on the income statement, one on the balance sheet.
Can you repeat that?
So motor pool rent and interfund loans handled completely differently, separate accounting. One's on the income statement, one's on the balance sheet.
So this 5950 is from enterprise funds, but normally if the general fund was making payments, it would show on that line as well.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's why that number for 2022 proposed is, I won't say half, but
Close.
250,000
Close
less
to
than.
half, yeah.
And so those actuals in 2016, 17, 18, 19, those were enterprise funds paying into. And then 2020, the actuals, that's enterprise fund and,
Yep. 20 and
General.
21 were the only 2 years on here that paid with general fund contributions.
okay.
And Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add to, is we had talked about previously, right now, general fund is not paying in, but my intention is when we know the health insurance premium, we have it up 10%. You know, I'm hoping for a zero increase. I know that's a stretch, but if it is a zero increase, then that difference, and it should be about 270,000, then funding the general fund as much as possible, more. especially the bigger ticket, usually public works being the bigger ticket, police being the bigger ticket, at least those.
Okay, so that actually is good to hear, if that's how those funds will be used.
So zero, we want zero. You want zero?
Are there any other questions about the motor pool, as riveting as that is?
As you can see, a lot of questions back and forth to Sam. It's like, yeah, but it doesn't tie out to this and it doesn't tie out to that.
I wish I was better at explaining how accounting works, but once you get it, you get it.
You know, there's been a lot of years where the motor pool wasn't even really discussed, so it's
Right.
nice to rehash it and make sure we understand.
And I think you did a fine job.
Yes. Especially for public watching, I think it's helpful, so yeah, thank you for that. Next, CIP.
So Madam Mayor, I'm going to just apologize right now. I honestly didn't spend a whole lot of time on this and just didn't have the time to spend on this. And then when I knew that the general fund was going to be underfunded in the red, it also honestly became as little less important because I knew some of the items couldn't be funded. So thank you to the departments who submitted their information. And so today I worked on it and had questions back and forth to them. And I apologize for not getting it to you sooner or even having a further in-depth previous conversation with you, which would be the intention for next year. So with that, this is what we have. The first two pages are the enterprise funds and their requests. And I've asked the directors to be here. And as you can see, it starts with the harbor. And Norm has all of the, any questions that you might have, he has all of the answers. And as you can see, there's also other source funding for the projects within the harbor. And Harbor Master Regis can explain that if there are questions.
So Norm, maybe talk about the ones that are already underway.
So just a quick update on the DKNL flow. So we got a schedule, schedule gonna start like right at the beginning of January. The cathodic protection one, they're gonna probably start in January also. He says that's like a week or two to get that one finished. And the Northeast Launch Ramp, we open up bids on next Friday, and then within 10 days, they're supposed to give us a schedule. So I imagine it'll be next year also, but it should all be done in 2023. And right now, I'm out with some engineers to look at 5-ton crane on the IDOC, and also a washdown pad on this side of the bay.
So and I might just say, from my time on the Port and Commerce Advisory Board, those two items have been, you know, on their wish list and their recommendations for quite a long time. So that's something that the Port and Commerce Advisory Board has been putting
Correct,
forward.
and I happened to see Bob and let him know, and he was really excited. So most of you know
Bob
that
Linville.
Bob Linville's really excited about the crane on this side.
That's so cool.
And then I've got, you know, the city manager, and if we do not get that infrastructure money, we can take it out of the reserves to make this happen.
Well, and you know, just to, I mean, some of these things we hear about this, but we've always talked about for years to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our fishing fleet and the working boats in our harbor, and that's the gap that crane will meet.
Correct.
And then also having a washdown pad on this side is great for our environment, and also boat storage and having people keep their boats here and work on their boats here over the winter, which helps with our economy on the off season.
Correct. We also got a lot of support from the Sea Life Center. They wrote some letters
Right.
and stuff, and because I tried to go through EBOS at first to pay for it, and EBOS wasn't doing infrastructure. They were just doing for nonprofits. So, but it's nice to get this moving forward.
And if I may, Norm touched on, I also think a good point, I feel like, that as he stated, we'll seek after infrastructure money for these projects with all of them as well. And thankfully, the harbor has reserves that if the infrastructure money does not happen for the harbor, that they can complete the projects That won't be the case for every project listed on here, for other departments, but it is also, we're gonna use this as a tool for infrastructure money as well.
Go ahead. Yeah, oh, you took a breath like you had a
Yeah.
question. Go ahead.
The X float and the Z float, just to clarify, those are not on the horizon, they're on the wish list, but everything else.
So
I can
correct,
get
so, you probably get our engineering firm that we have on, for the on-call engineering, so you could probably give us a rough estimate what the electric would cost. I don't know what it would be, I don't know, we have to bring in a bigger transformer. But some of you might remember when Z float was built, it was built to take on those extra floats. So that just getting with, of course it was R&M at the time, to design going out, and everything's there. I think even the transformer is big enough to carry that load. So, and with the Mustang moving across, it's going to lighten the load on Z float. So.
And then SMIC?
SMIC, so SMIC's a little bit different. We don't have any reserves. We have a little bit, but not very much. We have been in the black. So we're trying to do everything we can out of pocket. And with Doug had a lot of work done in the quarry, so we're kind of doing some filling in some areas, some low areas. Just when the guys, have some time, they're hauling in dirt and stuff. And Doug guys did a great job on the roads over there. I think the combination between the two, everything's kind of working for that. For SMIC area. Now fencing in is a whole different issue. That's going to be a lot of money up front, which we don't have at this time, but we just keep looking at it, hopefully we can get some grant money.
Thank you. Any other questions for the harbor master? Go ahead.
What needs fenced over there?
So there's been talk about fencing the entire yard because there's been some thieving going on like everywhere. But if we fence it in and have one access point in and out, we can put a camera there and see who's coming in and out. But the whole area wanted to be fenced in at one time. It came from PACAP. They wanted to fence in the entire area to secure it.
The outside perimeter of the whole area.
You've been in the yard. All the boats are. We want to fence in that whole area.
So there'd still be access
Yeah,
to
the
4th
roads
of
that
July.
we open, just the boatyard we fenced in.
Okay.
The city piece of it.
Right. I didn't notice it. I mean, there's boats on either side of the road, right? And
There's,
you go back around.
well, there's several roads, but the first road you can go all the way around to Jag
Okay.
without being, strange. We do put a fence up.
Thank you.
And the beach access. Yeah. Just there, public, which is a great question. Public access to that beach should be
It'll
maintained.
still be available.
Yeah. Any other questions for the harbor master? Thank you.
So next is water. And Doug is here to answer any questions. And as you can see, so on the far right column is the source of funding, possible sources of funding. Some of these, they're not designated for funding now, but that is something that we will go after for funding.
Do you want to once over quick, or do you have questions on it, or?
Go ahead.
Are there any that are currently funded or slated to start?
If you look down, just the second one down, the hypochlorite generator, we did get a rural water loan for that. It's a half price. It was $467,000, I believe, was the total. So the half of that is city and half is the rural water loan. That would be the out at SMIC to bring it up to speed like our other water. Saves us from doing any chlorine after that, and we're just having trouble even getting it hauled at the expense of everything. It's just way more efficient system. So anyway, we got it. It was a good loan to get on that one. The water meter program, we're working on that, but that's right now out of city. And you'll see the duplicate of that on the wastewater. We're anticipating to switch as many meters as we can after this works, or the water sewer rate study. And we're anticipating that's going to have a 3-year cost of roughly $500,000. So we can split that over 3 years out of 2 different departments, out of the water fund and out of the wastewater fund.
Go ahead.
So is that in the 2022 budget, the portion of what you just referred to?
It would be out of the wastewater fund balance and the water fund
Right.
balance. So it's not necessarily in the operational, but it's under the CIP, so we would come to you and say, okay, here's what we've got. It's passed now, we've got the new rates, we've got the new water, sewer, tariffs set to go, and we're gonna go all the meters. Here's what we need to do, and we'd come to you with that program to how to do it, and it would be funded out of the reserves of water and out of the reserves of sewer in those fund balances.
So with some contracting services, like the engineering and design and different things, some of these projects could be developed enough if there's federal funds that come down to
Yeah.
apply for? Okay.
Yeah. And that's gonna be a big thing with what we're really trying to do in the next year to 2 to 3 years. As that infrastructure money rolls, they keep mentioning water and wastewater in rural communities, and there's funding available. We hope it is, but we also know we're competing against the whole nation too, and then once it gets to Alaska, we're competing with the other communities in Alaska for that. But there's some real good possibilities to pick up some funding for this program or others down the list as we go. So most of these that you're looking at, yes, we are looking at putting those out, at least having a package so it's ready to go.
Go ahead.
Just a quick question, Doug, and you might not have the answer to this, but where it says replace infrastructure past useful life goal of 2027, how much of our infrastructure would you say is past the useful life right now, like percentage-wise?
Past its useful life, there's a lot of it that's 50 years old, put in back right after the earthquake, more than 50 years old. Most of it's running just fine. We do as many checks as we can, but it's in the ground.
Right.
So a lot of what we have to do on that older stuff is keep things going and monitor where we're at, and then it's a replacement. So that's kind of just a, hey, we've got these out there. This is one that really needs it, that we've kept having a break here and there that we have to do.
Okay, thank you.
And God, if I might, it's something that we could develop as an overall, I'm gonna say project, so we should be identifying those that need replacement so that we can become part of the clean water fund and the drinking water fund, and to get on their list of priorities. So the more we can identify, there's a scoring criteria and a lot of things that we'll work with the engineer on to get on these lists for funding. But this is part of it, is identifying, and more robustly than just this, we'll have to get more robust with our identification, but this starts it.
Very similar to having the things on the priority list as it goes through legislation. But having that out there, you can at least show that we're pushing for those.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Go
if I
ahead.
may, I can go to wastewater if you
Yep,
want, we can go
yep.
through that. There's, not a lot of real big things on there to start, but coming up there is, and so we're looking at the manhole refurbishment. We've got a couple of things on the manholes. There's some that have infiltration, which means the pipe that's coming in with the sewer line, around the pipe, the grout has broke out on some of them. Well, groundwater, get a lot of rain, starts coming down, we're processing way more water liquid through our system through these old vaults. So we need to go through the manhole vaults to get those. The second thing is, for whatever reason, way back when, I don't know, maybe that was the only lids, you'll see a bunch of lids out here for sewer. They're kind of honeycomb, they got holes all in them.
Yeah.
All it's doing is let water drain in them.
Right.
They should be a solid lid with maybe one hole that you dig it.
Yeah.
But why they put them in, I don't know, but it's not just the cheapest thing to just go out and do. Those solid metal lids cost a little money, so we're working on knocking some of those out to help with the infiltration. The more we can shut off at that, the less we have to process out of the plant.
Yeah, that's great.
So that's what we're working ahead to save money down the road. And then, of course, the big one we're looking up, it's coming out a ways out here, but the low point, the sludge removal, we're really looking at one to try to get the funding through these grants too, to have that out, that this is what we're doing. This time when we do the sludge removal, we'll also be doing a new liner in there, so it's just up to that time to get, once we're ready to start sludge removal, if you I don't know how many were around here when we did the last one, was just back in 2015, so several probably were, but we did all the new systems out there. They had to set in with a helicopter. With a helicopter to set in 40 of those biodomes. Well, to do a new liner, you have to have a helicopter to pick them all out.
Take them all out.
And then send them all back in. So part of what we're doing, I mean, we're upgrading as we go. We'll upgrade those things. And I think this next meeting will have the findings from the survey or the actual report that the engineering firms did. So that'd be good to have, and we can look at some of those things. Some of it's just more aeration, but they'll get that through that whole thing. But we'll be able to do those things concurrently and put them into effect, so.
Can you tell me your projected date of the sludge removal?
Sludge removal, we're looking at 2025 or 2026.
And is this $2 million including both lagoons or just Low Point?
I hope to do both, but it's most likely just Low Point of this thing. But when they're here, we'd rather do both if we can.
Okay, and then the last one. Does the $2 million include the replacement of the liner?
Yes.
Thank you.
So the Smith work with the lower lift station, piping for bypass design and construction, I know those are out in 2023. There's the Smith lower lift station. Does that get us anywhere with helping to plan for future development over there, or what do those accomplish?
They both help. The SMIC lower lift station is actually the lower lift station over in the boatyard, and it's just it's not really a big lift station. It just needs a building to be upgraded. Once it's snowed over and frozen, it just makes it super difficult to keep it maintained. It's not a huge use yet, but it's getting there.
Yeah.
The bypass is actually something up at the SMIC lagoon, and to be able to do the sludge removals, last time we literally had to pump it down, run all the sewage over to the other lagoon, constantly in trucks trying to get it over there while we did that work. This allows a bypass to make it much easier to do.
Okay.
And hopefully as we do development over there, then we look at, improving that lagoon, maybe to make it a 2-cell similar to this, that we can literally use one and not the other sometimes, just to do repairs.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? Thanks, Doug.
Sure. Rob, you want to get your electric ones for me?
Sure. Right, man. Go right on. On the electric side, if you look at the first 6 on the list, those are all part of the infrastructure work that we'll be doing over the next few years. The next 4 items on the list, you see they're all basically subdivisions and they're cable replacements. So those are underground cables that are at the end of their service life. What we've tried to do, if you look at how we've spread them out over the years, so that we're not trying to get them all done in a single year, we spread those costs out with Stony Creek scheduled first in 2023. And the next item after the cables, security cameras at Fort Raymond, that would be for inside and outside. We have cameras today, but they are not working as they should. They're still functional, so we're going to try to nurse them along as well. We also, if you look at the projected cost on the security cameras, we think we can do better than that, so we're going to continue to search and see if we can come up with a vendor who can beat that cost. And then the radiator hoods at Fort Raymond, those are radiator hoods that are a part of our systems with the generators. And again, they are aging and they need to be replaced as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Can you tell me the amount of the reserves in the electric department?
Yeah, I can get that for you.
Are there any other questions for the electric utility manager?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Because we're playing catch up again with all of the bond that we'll be taking out for all of the work, have we started to figure out how much we need to save to do preventative maintenance so we don't have this problem all at once in the future again?
Yeah, we are definitely going to be implementing ongoing assessment and maintenance programs like we talked earlier on the right-of-way.
Right. Okay.
Again, as we look at our incoming revenues, we have to adjust rates maybe in the future to help take care of some of these things, but we will not be paying the exorbitant cost that we are today as we play catch up. Hopefully all of these costs will be much lower because we are running a consistent program on an annual basis.
Okay, thank you.
That answered your question. Any other questions? Great, thank you. The last department for the enterprise is parking. And that's closed.
Can I actually ask one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. The transmission line upgrade to Downport Avenue, is that on this?
That's the New Harbor substation. It's the number 6 item on the list.
Did you have a follow-up?
No, that's it, thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
So we just have one capital project slated for parking, and that's just the replacement of our existing parking kiosk. So that equipment's nearing the end of its useful service life. The modems will be outdated as the telecom providers shut down the 3G networks here. Actually, these kiosks will be non-functional as of next year. So it's definitely timing-wise good timing. There's also potential cost benefit, cost savings that we could realize with this. We might be able to consolidate some of our other various parking platforms, such as our mobile parking payment system and some of our parking compliance and enforcement systems all into one system. So that's potential cost savings. That's it.
Oh, I see.
When were those parking kiosks bought? Seems like they're not that old.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
You're probably thinking of the campground ones.
Okay.
The parking ones are much older.
Okay, okay, that's good to hear. So like 8 years?
I think
I started
it was
in
2012.
I started in parking in 14, and they were the ones that are there now. So at
Okay.
least that one.
Okay. Did you have a question?
No, I just saw the answer on the sheet, thank you.
And there are more, we did fund parking positions, so if there's labor and staff next summer, or when there's labor and staff, parking will be monitored.
Yes, ma'am. It's our intention to advertise or hire for those positions.
Okay, thank you. Do you have another question? I'm sorry. Okay.
So the enterprise fund, and then on to the general fund. This is the last page. As I stated, this is a little trickier just because of the budget. The one thing that I would, let me back up. The CIP is done a little differently than what I'm used to, which is, it's not incorrect, let me just say. It works, and it works well here. It's just, I'm used to it, CIP items being funded in the operation budget once they're identified, and that is not how it is done here. And part of what we may be able to fund in '22, and I'm kind of asking Sam this question on the spot, so we didn't talk about it, but it's through 22, we do know that we believe that there will be a healthy transfer back to the reserves because of the income in 21. And so because of that, the one thing that I would like to do after we know all the numbers, and I don't know the time frame of this, is to revisit some of the general fund CIP projects, so that if there was revenue over expenses, a healthy revenue over expenses, then we can revisit them to be funded. I do want to say I just remembered one item that did not make it on there, and I'm sorry, but looking at you, I just remembered it, and I'll add it. The cemetery column.
Oh,
I'll make sure that gets on this list.
oh,
It was on my list to put on, but I didn't. So we can go through the projects, and then, but that's what my thought was today for funding.
okay. Does that make sense to everyone? Do we want to just go down the list, or are there ones people want to highlight?
I guess,
Go ahead.
just a follow-up question, since we're talking on the spot, I don't know if you can even answer this, but do you guys have any projection or idea of how much additional over budgeted revenues we anticipate having in 2021? Like, is it like $5,000 or $200,000 or $600,000?
So, year-to-date from the last check we got, we were about $500,000 over in 20, just in sales tax.
Okay.
I only look at sales tax just because we get that number monthly, and it's a lot easier to see, and it's the biggest revenue we have.
And that doesn't,
And the third quarter check is gonna be here in the next 2 weeks, and that's gonna be the big indicator of how we did in 21. In the past, it's been about 1.2, 1.3 million. I anticipate it's gonna be quite a bit higher than that. So once we get that, we'll let you guys know, and then that gives you an idea of how we did this year. And then like she said, we're anticipating a good revenue over expense surplus this year. And typically in the past, what we've done is transfer half of that into the capital acquisition fund to fund some of the smaller capital projects from this list, which we do through appropriations through council.
As a resolution then?
As a resolution, yeah.
Okay.
So we may or may not be bringing that, but I was just saying what we do, what I have done in the past with
So go ahead. I'll let you.
That,
I said hi. I
Okay.
saw Rissy first.
Did I hear you correct that you said the second quarter was $500,000 over budgeted?
over same year-to-date last year.
And
Oh,
quarter
okay.
2 is up 22% over 2019.
okay.
Yeah.
22%, thank you, that's perfect.
Was that your
That was my
question?
question, thank you.
So we anticipate a very strong return.
Yeah, that's the kind of the going percentage that I've heard across the board as far as the difference in town, so I would count on that.
And I didn't want to like, these are it, until we have the solid numbers. So that's why it's presented to you, and we'd like to fund, but it'll be a multi-step process to actually fund these.
So we do anticipate being above that 3 to 6 month band again after we could receive that quarter 3 check. So which, if you think about it, is a good thing, but then again, I think Christie's made this point, is we don't really want to be over that 6 month band, because then that means taxpayer dollars are sitting there idle when they could be put to good use, so.
Not everyone on the dais maybe agrees with me, because we do have maybe some future economic uncertainty, but I would like to see our money be put to. I like the higher end. I'd rather have 6 months
Right.
rather than the 3 months.
Right.
And that, you know, our policy says 3 to 6. There might be some more conservative members on the dais that we can, you know, talk about that at different times.
The other thing just to point out though, and you'll see a recap in the CMR, you'll see it in the packet for the 25th, is, so on the September 13th meeting, the top 5 CIP items were discussed. And I guess just as one illustrative example is we want to add utilities, add water and electric to all the RV dry sites currently, because we believe that there's going to be really high return on investment. So that's probably a $400,000 project, I think is what we had it projected as. So items like that where we can put that money to good use and recoup, you know, that revenue over the course of the next 2 to 3 years. Projects like that are the types of things that we would recommend that we utilize some of those additional funds for.
Yeah, I do. I mean, even that first one, those sidewalk and ADA ramp repairs, that would make a big life change, quality of life to a lot of our citizens for $75,000. I mean, something like that would be great to accomplish too. I mean, we've had Nicholas Woodard here a number of times talking about how those citizens are severely impacted by kind of our curb cuts and sidewalk situation. Go ahead.
So if we're talking about having too much in our reserves, I do see the construction of public works slated or wished for 2023. So, you know, that might be another good reason to have a healthy reserve so that when 2023 comes, we can say, oh, our reserves are at 9 months, so we have these 3 months to shave off, let's put it towards that.
That's a great point.
And then we can open all those lots up.
And also helps with some of our housing.
Right, exactly. A win-win.
We've gone through this list quite a bit, it feels like. Are there any other highlights from the dais or from administration?
I just had a question. You'll have to take me back. Under fire and police, public safety radios, how are those related to the radios that we were talking about funding? Is that?
That's them.
That's them. Okay. It's all the same, but, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Do you have a
No,
follow-up?
no, that's okay.
The subdivision that we were,
Hemlock subdivision?
thank you. Would that be a CIP item?
We'd start the engineering and that being the operational, and then once we have the engineering, we'll actually be able to bring it back then for funding, and it would be from reserves.
But just checking, but the engineering is in this 2022 budget for that Hemlock subdivision.
Correct.
Is there any way to add the Hemlock subdivision on this? Is that a thing that you would do?
We can, portions of it would be actually enterprise, so I mean, we can, I mean,
I don't know if it's the wish of the council. I just really want to see lots. I want to see more families be able to buy homes and buy land here.
So I bring that up whenever people talk about what are we doing to help the housing crisis. I say we, which I'm gonna get in trouble. I'm glad I'm not sitting next to John for him to kick me. But you know, I think that I would like to see that subdivision developed. I don't know that we've ever done. We've talked about it as a council. It would be great to have it somewhere in our budget book so that it's highlighted
Or even
on this list.
On this list would be ideal.
The problem is you probably don't have an amount.
Oh, gotcha.
They might, until the engineering's done, they wouldn't necessarily have an amount.
And things don't go on this without an amount, right?
I mean, they have a pending.
Yes, but not
So, and it doesn't have to get decided tonight.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
He'll add more, but if the council is comfortable, I'm comfortable with adding this because I think it is a priority, so, and I know that everyone, but it won't, all right, maybe I should. I forgot that not everyone is in agreement.
For the public, could you explain what we're talking about with the Hemlock subdivision, please?
So,
Yes, we know.
so water, wastewater, maybe Doug wants to jump in, stops at that, what's that, North South Street, Doug?
Diamond Hemlock?
Diamond. So water sewer stops right there, and we had previously talked about, and I'm glad I'm not sitting next to John too.
I know.
We
I
talked
just
about
realized what I was saying.
putting in, R&M's currently working on an engineering design for a subdivision there. It's probably gonna be 13 lots.
And when you say there, let's be really
This
clear
is
for
what
the
I want the
public.
public to hear.
It's the Hemlock Campground,
Forest Acres.
Forest
oh,
Acres,
sorry, Forest Acres Campground.
Right.
Correct.
That's the boundary. Does not include the new bike park, does
Correct.
not include the new basketball
Correct.
park, does not include any of the senior housing lots.
Correct.
It's just the Forest Acres
There
Campground.
is no
Correct.
intention to sell any of the items you just stated.
But it does include the Forest Acres campground.
But what we're
Correct.
talking
I
about
mean,
is
people
the,
need to hear
yeah,
this.
the Forest Acres Campground.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes. So just between, well, just south of Hemlock and then, I don't even, yeah, Diamond there, that northern portion of it. The other thing I want to just bring up is, just as a reminder to council, we have the developer reimbursement program, which not analogous to what you're talking about, but it dovetails into that same topic. We've got $1.1 million now that's sitting in the developer reimbursement program. So that's a different, but another mechanism for expanding utilities in whatever areas you might choose. And we had talked previously about using the sale of municipal land and splitting off 50% possibly into that developer reimbursement program. So there's a couple different methods. The other thing is we've got some ARPA money, and so administration will be bringing some options before council in the near future to possibly using ARPA money to expand utilities in various locations that we have in mind. The other thing is we've been talking to our engineering firm just the past 2 weeks. We've had weekly calls with them to talk about developing the bench over at SMIC, and we should be bringing something before council in the very near future. We'll probably mention this in subsequent council meetings. I know there's a lot of talk in the public about the need for affordable housing, and administration, our preference would be to really focus on that key issue when you talk about projects that we're going to be working on in the next couple of years, because we all know that that is the primary barrier to development in our community. The biggest thing that's holding us back, and so administration's recommendation would be that everything, most of what we do ties back to the housing issue. So great example of why we want to get the public works shop done, because that can turn into 28 lots down the road. So we are very, very, very focused on creating affordable housing in our community, because we have such a dramatic need. So I know it's a big topic in the community, and yes, we are very focused on it.
And when we talk about infrastructure, even when Doug was talking about replacement, or was talking about, okay, yes, we need to do that, but we need to also add. So where can we add that would help, even with DRP, because some of it, the infrastructure is going to be so cost prohibitive that maybe a developer would not be interested in it. But if we get the infrastructure in, then they can connect to our system, and that just adds more. Now, do keep in mind that that is an infrastructure that grant dollars that we will be chasing to get that main infrastructure, the highest cost, funded another way. Go ahead.
The 500 that we got from Norwegian, wasn't that supposed to be dedicated?
DRP.
Oh, did we put that in the DRP?
Yes.
Okay. Just to use for,
Develop.
okay, okay. Thank you.
And for the public, we did have a work session that we discussed all of this.
Yeah.
So it's not like,
Right.
I mean, for the public, this has already been public, to just re-announce to the public, or you've already discussed.
And as we move forward, where we have more definitive answers, so we're getting answers from our engineer, we wanted to make sure, to move from theoretical projects to like, can this be done? Talking to our engineers to see if it can be done, then they'll come to you actually for approval as well. So we're just getting answers to see if a project can be done, and then it'll come to you. One that we're thinking of that we do need approval on is the Hemlock subdivision, or whatever it's going to be called. So all of these will come before you at a later date as well.
Can you tell us what PERPA is?
The
American
American Rescue Plan Act.
Oh, there, yeah.
called Liard? Liard, L-I-A-R-D, no?
That might be for maybe public sector, but not for us. I don't know that one at all, but there could be, there are other funds that are going out under the Rescue Act.
So I guess for me with those housing projects on the CIP, I mean, there's a number of factors that feed into it. So at this point, it might be a little complicated to start putting them on here, but I'm glad we had the discussion tonight that it's still on everyone's radar.
Okay, that sounds good. And part of what we talked about too, which you will see at a later date, are the legislative priorities, and within that being the infrastructure for these properties as well. So it'll eventually all tie back together. And we're starting on, like I say, step one of a lot of steps, but we are now on step one rather than talking these projects. So we're pretty happy to be starting at least on step one.
You know, this is a rabbit hole, but, sorry, I'm just gonna say it anyways. You know, on our city website page, we should have a page dedicated to our developer reimbursement program. Because if or even maybe work with the chamber for a page, because, you know, if someone's like, oh, I'm a contractor and like to go to Seward, I mean, having that highlighted in some way would be helpful.
Yeah, just marketing it in some sense too,
Yeah.
to developers.
We
in
definitely
town.
want our local contractors to have first go, but, you know,
I am
cruise
also
over the
working
number.
on the code provision for it, because as you remember,
Oh,
the
yeah,
language is a
I-
little clunky,
yeah.
so I'm still continuing to work on that.
Maybe we want to wait till that's fixed, but I mean, at some
At
point,
least we could get it up there to
Yeah.
advertise, and then,
so, any questions for the public or administration with the CIP list? Go ahead.
Just one comment, and was kind of curious, is there any way that some of this design and engineering expenses can be combined if we look at maybe combining where we put public works and a new fire department, possibly a new police station, if there's a co-locating some of those? Can any of those costs be combined if we're looking at designing that as maybe a multi-agency area?
I'm gonna put the chief on the spot real quick, and because we've talked a lot about how to do public safety down the road. There's a lot of fire work grants available for fire stations and police stations, but if I could put Chief Nickel on the spot to talk about Homer's experience with that topic, that doesn't, sometimes that works out, but sometimes it doesn't.
Right, so, in Homer, they were looking at the same thing, the same exact infrastructure issues that we have facing us. So, they looked at both a public safety building, and then they compared that with individually building a police station and refurbishing the existing fire station. In their case, it turned out to be cheaper to build a police station and refurbish, which I was kind of surprised at. Conventional wisdom would think that, combining would be the cheapest thing, but in their case, it wasn't. I've gotten a copy of their RFP that they used, and I've got I know who their contractor was, out of Anchorage, and, if we can get this rolling, I think we've got a lot of good base to start working from. So, but it's gonna start with a feasibility study, and let's find out what the most practical thing for Seward is going to be.
The one thing that you won't find on the CIP is a new city hall. And honestly, that's done on purpose because we'd rather work on the infrastructure for housing before we, and get housing, quote unquote, solved, at least on its way to being solved before a new city hall. So it is not on there. However, we recognize that our other fire, police, there are some needs there that we hope to address as well.
questions, comments? So moving forward, Monday night we have work session and then a regular meeting. And then,
Could you state what the work session's for and the time?
how is it advertised?
5 o'clock to discuss Public Works relocation options.
So there's that. Yeah, no, that's
There,
good.
I'm not sure, I'm sorry Brenda, I don't know where it is in the process, but there are documents that have been forwarded to the clerk's office.
Thank you. I'll have the packet out in the morning.
And then, November 1st,
Correct, at
we
6
will,
p.m.
at 6 p.m., we will have another budget work session.
Mm-hmm.
All the loose laydowns and the updates will be provided at that one in a new book, is that correct?
I'm calling it the second draft budget.
Okay.
So it'll all be one document of the second draft budget. And then, I'm sorry, do you want to?
No, that was perfect. So like between now and then, like just the example, like the dog food will get back put in there. You'll check on questions like we asked tonight. You'll make adjustments based on, working and we might even have healthcare costs back potentially, or when will that be?
I don't know by the.
Probably not by the
Okay.
time we get it passed.
So you'll be making adjustments. We'll have that book in time to review prior to that meeting.
I told Sam my goal is Wednesday to get it to the clerk's office by
Okay.
Wednesday, so.
That's great. And so we'll have another night of questions and highlights. And then from that, you'll bring it back to us for the November 22nd meeting is when we're gonna start having the public hearings on the general fund and the enterprise funds.
Correct. And one thing that you'll see differently, so at one point, Mr. Ryerson came and he asked a question about basically the format. And he was right. So the documents that you have now are actually Excel spreadsheets that we're using as what we call working copies. It's working documents. It's easy to plug in what if and then see the balance populate and on and on and on. For the public hearing and for the final document, it will actually be the AccuFund documents because once after the work session on the 1st, then finance will start inputting those into AccuFund. And then it becomes the official document after that for the public hearing and the subsequent adoption. Also for public hearing, I have a list of documents that will come back in, more revenue detail, debt service, transfer schedule, some other documents that are in the budget will come in as well. I'll have the letter of transmittal, which will stay draft until the budget's adopted because if there's any amendments, it affects that letter. And then after adoption, then the other things that come in, the graphs and all that, because we won't have the information until the budget's adopted, so that's the plan.
And then I just have one question, but you had talked about perhaps a couple special meetings if needed?
Yes, thank you. So if needed, 2 special meetings requesting December 1st and then the December 6th if it is needed. What we'd like to have, if at all possible, is to have these special meetings which enable you to make amendments because it's a special meeting, you can take action. So that way when we get to the the second public hearing and adoption, then hopefully we have before you a clean copy with all of the new numbers. We'll have to work out the mechanics of how we create that. But anyway, so that way you have final numbers and that you know what you're adopting. That does not prohibit you from making amendments that night as well. Go for it and do whatever you need to do. But at least we'll be able to give you the most up-to-date numbers. So that's why we're thinking the special meeting to give you the opportunity to amend and for us to give you the correct numbers.
And that way we can make these changes so that we're not making them on the fly at that last.
Meeting. Yeah, it should be great. And the budget has to be adopted at a regular meeting, so
Not
you'll,
less
that's, so
than
that's
10
what,
days
yeah.
before the end of the year.
And sorry, you.
No worries. Will you by any chance have, I know you said you won't have the healthcare costs by the 1st, would you have third quarter
Yes.
numbers?
Yes.
So that's gonna be a huge
Okay.
help.
And hopefully we'll have healthcare by the 22nd, but no guarantees. They set their time frame
So there is a possibility that you'll have the numbers
for healthcare
For
on the
healthcare.
22nd.
November 22nd.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry,
March.
November 22nd.
Okay.
I wish,
wish.
0.
Well, with that, any other comments from council? We will adjourn the work session at 7:45.